So welcome, friends. This is continuation of our commentary on the great Surangama Sutra. So before we continue, let us spend some time in meditation. And we can use one of the analogies in the sutra, which is a good way for us to sit. Our true mind is the host. Everything that arises and passes are the guests. The host stays home. The guests come and go. Our mind's awareness is always here. It never goes anywhere. But the things that arise, the thoughts, the feelings, perceptions, ideas, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, they're the guests, endlessly coming and going. We need to learn to remember that we are the host and not to follow after the guests. So in our meditation, we don't try to stop thought or block thought or sounds or sights, but we learn to rest in mindful awareness, mindful alertness. Or we could say relaxing into our own natural awareness and learn to let everything else just arise and disappear as is their nature. So please notice as we sit in meditation, doing our best, thoughts coming and going, sounds arising, passing, sensations in the body arising, passing, pleasant, unpleasant. All of this is arising in the mind's awareness. That is what is unchangeable. If we're to say anything is permanent, it is this original mind awareness. It is this that the Surangama Sutra is about, helping us see who and what we truly are. So let us continue. There are some people who are new tonight, have not been here before for the Surangama Sutra teachings. Just raise your hand if this is your first time. So there are some, and online there are also people who first time tonight. How many people do we have online? 46. Yeah, so just so we can keep going, I won't go back over what we've covered, other to say that it's really, it's just the Buddha teaching about the nature of mind. This is his deepest teaching. Comes out of his deepest realization. This comes out of his enlightenment. And even though the drama begins with his cousin Ananda, who's a monk, getting lost in desire, the Buddha only teaches about the mind. So even though Ananda, with his eyes, saw a young woman who was quite attractive to him, the fault was not in the eye. The fault was in the mind. And so the Buddha wants to get Ananda and all the other disciples around to understand that it is the mind that sees. And so he, for a good section, he takes all the people who are listening to his talk through a fairly extensive exercise in looking for the location of the mind. And through very clear logical analyses, etc., he shows that in truth, this fundamental mind awareness is not inside the body, it's not outside the body, it's not in between, it doesn't start somewhere, it doesn't end somewhere, nor does it not start somewhere. I mean, he just goes through every possibility, basically showing that in a certain sense we have two minds, or we have two aspects of mind. One aspect of mind is, we might say, our conditioned mind, the world, the mind that has been conditioned by language, right? It is the conditioned mind that takes all the data comes in through the senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and sensations of the body, and creates thought about them, perceptions, ideas. And that this whole universe that we have created is not our true mind. Our true mind, the Buddha says, is beyond space and time, birthless, deathless. It is just pure awareness, beyond any form, any conceptualization. It just is. Like right now, all of us are aware. That is the most fundamental thing. We are all aware. We might be aware of sounds, we might be aware of sights, we may be aware of our so-called self, our bodies. Our awareness, the Buddha points out, is always here. And it is not to be confused with all the things that arise in it, including the idea of a self, the idea of me. So it's very important to understand that the Buddha is really setting forth his most profound teachings for his disciples to introduce them to who and what they truly are, and to show them that this whole linguistic formation of thoughts, feelings, perceptions, ideas, memories that they have constructed to label the world and label their experience is not true. And yet that is the world that most of us live in. And now I'm in the beginning of the chapter, section 3, called The Five Aggregates of the Matrix of Thus Come One. And the Buddha says to Ananda, Ananda, you have not yet understood that the objects we perceive are unreal and illusory. They are subject to change. They appear here and there and disappear here and there. Yet these illusions, each with this conventional designation, which means we give everything a word, we give everything a label, are in fact within the essential wondrous enlightenment. And then he lists everything else that makes up a human being is within this matrix of enlightenment. You haven't understood that. That everything that comes and goes, everything that comes into being and ceases to be, is within the true nature of what his Kier called the matrix of the thus come one. This means the Tathagata Garbha. What does this mean? And this is a very profound teaching. It means that everything in the whole universe, inner and outer and anywhere, is all part of this enlightened matrix, we might say, of being, of pure awareness. And that there is absolutely no way to get out of it because we are it. And everything is arising in it. And everything is arising out of it. It is basically, it is only because of this, and often the Tathagata is translated as the womb of the Buddhas. It means it's, like womb is that which gives life to everything. It is the place where life is created. It is all coming out of this fundamental matrix of the Buddha mind. Now that's not the experience of most of us, is it? That no matter where we go, no matter what we do, no matter what we think, good thoughts, bad thoughts, happy thoughts, suffering thoughts, that all of this is arising within the matrix of what he's calling the matrix of the thus come one, which is wondrous, everlasting understanding, the unmoving, all-pervading oneness, suchness of reality, and that everything is in it. So I'm just sharing that because, and then that goes on for chapters. I mean, this is a very detailed, and the Buddha really explains everything about that. But it's a fundamental shift. And the Buddha is saying because we live identified with this small little tiny world, right? Of which the centerpiece of this world is this little tiny thing called me. And that this fundamental delusion of who and what we really are is the essential source of our suffering. If we really knew who we were and could experience who we were in this vast way, all of our delusions, all of our illusions, all of our sufferings would go away. And you remember last time I read the story of the parable of Yajnadatta, which again is the Buddhist statement that even our delusion has no basis. It's not a real thing. So even though we live in this delusion, and if you remember Yajnadatta, he's at his friend's house and he's offered some wine to drink, and he looks in the wine glass, he sees a snake because he didn't dare challenge his host to say, hey, how could you? He's very polite. He drank it. He drank the snake, got home, and immediately fell ill. He became deathly ill. Right? The same way, in a certain sense, we're all deathly ill from our delusions, from our issues. Right? And his friend heard about this and heard about what happened. And he invited Yashodhara to come home, to come back to his house. He sat him in the same seat. He poured him a glass this time. He said, this is medicine that'll cure you. Yajnadatta picked it up, looked down in the medicine, and what do you think he saw? A snake. Immediately he looked up, and the man pointed to the ceiling. And what did they saw? Up on the ceiling was a bow, like a bow and arrow, the bow. And it was this bow that was hanging down that was reflected in the glass that looked like a snake. Immediately, he got well. He went from being deathly ill to immediately getting well. Now, how could that happen? It could only happen because his delusions, his ignorance, his issues didn't exist in any real way. And as soon as he saw that they had no reality to them, he immediately was liberated from them. You see, when the impediment is removed, since the awakened mind is our natural mind, we don't have to do anything. You see, many people think, to become awakened, to become enlightened, to become transformed, to become whole, to become complete, I have to do all this stuff. But Buddhism teaches, actually, it's just the opposite. We have to remove all the impediments that are preventing us from seeing who and what we really are, the way things really are. So this is an incredibly hopeful and positive, because many of us think our stuff, our ignorances, our issues, are all are me. They're real, they're solid, I just have to work with them endlessly. But in the Buddha's teachings, he's saying, no. All of this stuff is arising within this matrix of being that is totally undefiled. You can't defile it. So even if you think, I'm very impure, I have an impure mind, and I've done impure things in my life, that doesn't matter in terms of our intrinsic nature. Right? It's just again the example of a mirror, right? Ugly things can appear before the mirror, beautiful things can appear before the mirror. None of that sticks to the mirror. The mirror just reflects. The mirror is just aware. That's like our true mind. Now, of course, we need to realize that. Remember, Ananda's failure was he had a great intellectual understanding of the teachings. He was very loquacious. He could speak, but he didn't have realization. So that's why he was so easily thrown off course. This is going a little further. And the Buddha says, Ananda, if the mind that comes into being and ceases is the basis of your practice, which means this mind of thoughts endlessly coming and going, issues endlessly coming and going, desires endlessly coming and going, this mind that's endlessly coming and going, which is really just really the world of birth and death. If this is the basis of your practice, you will never be able to ride the Buddha's vehicle to where there is nothing that comes into being or ceases to be. For this to happen, you must shine the light of your understanding on the phenomena of the material world. So the phenomena of the material world means everything. Everything that we see, everything we smell, everything we taste, everything we touch, everything we feel. These are all the phenomena of the world. He said we need to shine our light of understanding on this and see that everything in this world is subject to change and decay. And so the Buddha says, how could the phenomena of the world and all these things of the world which are subject to decay, that have no solidity, how can that be the basis for our Dharma practice? So he said, look at all the things of the world. Is there one that doesn't decay? And then he says, but there is one thing that we all can be aware of that does not decay. Does anybody know what that is? Space. Space. Here we are in the meditation hall. We can't see it, but we know it's here. We call it space. This space is not subject, this is not a thing that is born and dies. There's no impediment to space. So he's really using space as an analogy for our true mind, for our true awareness. It has no impediments. You see, but we don't see the space in this room, do we? I mean, wherever you are, look around. You'll see most of, 99% of your room is space, empty space. But why don't we notice it? Why don't we notice the space, the openness? Because we are so focused on what? Objects. We look through the space and we focus on the objects, the things we see, the things we hear, the things we smell. And that's our world. But we don't see the most important thing is this vast space in which everything moves. And yet the space does not impede anything. It doesn't prevent anything from moving, does it? No. Totally free. And as we move through space, we don't leave a trace. Just like as thoughts, feelings, perceptions move through our mind, they leave no trace. And the Buddha goes on to talk about, because people would say, well, then, how come I don't? How come, if this is really the fundamental condition of mind, why don't I realize it? Why don't I live it? So the Buddha talks about turbidity, and he gives the example. What is turbidity? He says, this is the problem. He says there are 5 layers of it. He gives an example. He says water in its original state is pure, clear, while soil, ashes, and sand in their original states are solid and opaque. These defining attributes of water and of soil, ashes, and sand are such that they are mutually incompatible. Suppose that someone was to pick up some dirt, some soil, and throw it into the clear water. The soil would now lose its solidity, and the water would lose its purity. This is the mix, you see. So when you throw dirt into the pure water and it loses its solidity, the water becomes what? Cloudy. And here they translate that as it's turbid, it's cloudy. You can't see through it anymore. But you see, what he's also saying, that's what's happened to our pure consciousness. It's still here. The pure water is still here, but it's become mixed with the sand, with the soil, and therefore it is cloudy. Because it's cloudy, we can't see clearly. Right? We can't see clearly the pure water anymore. And so then the Buddha goes on to explain how that works in our life. For example, he says, your mind is habituated to endlessly recollecting the past, to endlessly thinking about the present, to endlessly anticipating the future. Okay? This is our dirt that we throw into this pure mind of ours. Because of these habits, the six consciousnesses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, arise, and they embrace the six kinds of objects. Our eyes see things, our ears hear sounds, our nose smells things, our mouth tastes things, our body senses and feels things, right? And our thinking mind is endlessly making contact with thoughts and feelings and perceptions. So this is the mixing, you see, right? The consciousnesses are endlessly mixing with the objects that they perceive, and the objects they perceive are endlessly being noticed and perceived and thought about by the consciousnesses. And so this is the turbidity. Now, see, it sounds deep, but it's really, just think about your mind. What goes on in it all day? Is it clear? Is it open? Is it spacious? Or is it turbid? It's cloudy with what? Thoughts, ideas, past, present, future, ruminations, obsessions, afflictions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories. I mean, do I need to go on? Isn't that what our mind is filled with all day? Isn't that what we're concerned about all day? And the Buddha's saying this is just like, the dirt and the ashes and the mud thrown into the clear water. The clear water is still there, right? But it's not clear anymore because it's gotten mixed with these other elements. In the same way, our pure nature, our pure Buddha nature, our pure awareness, our pure wisdom, that's naturally who we are, has gotten mixed up with all this dirt that we've been endlessly involved in. With this entanglement based on all our delusions, the mind becomes turbid with afflictions. Further, by night and day, beings ceaselessly come into being and perish endlessly in our world. People are born, people are die. They're always desiring something, wanting something, needing something. As they look around the world, they want, they grab, they grasp. So he says they're endlessly moving about, wanting, needing. So their karma leads them to keep moving around, and then their thoughts and their karma become entangled with each other. And with this entanglement, the turbidity of being a human being arises. And then the Buddha says, Ananda, now you wish to transform your visual, oral, tactile, and mental awareness, together with all other kinds of awareness, into something that is permanent, blissful, true self, the purity of the Buddha. To accomplish this, now he's beginning to move toward practice. To accomplish this, you must pull out the root of death and rebirth, which is meaning here this endlessly moving, where in a certain sense we're being born and dying all day long. We're endlessly moving into something. We follow something. A new experience is being born almost moment to moment, and then it ends, and then we start up again, and then it ends. A new mind state, a new feeling, a new need, a new want, a new happiness, a new sadness. We could say, this is endless birth and rebirth. This endless process that we are going to because we are endlessly grasping at the world. So he said we must pull out the root of birth and death and rely on that which is pure and perfect nature that neither comes into being nor ceases to be. So this is important because, especially for those of us following a meditative path, the Buddha is saying, if we want to realize our Buddha nature, if we want to really have the success of the Dharma, to rely on our conceptual mind and all its delusions and illusions and turbidity, we will never get there. It's impossible to get there. Right? So he's saying we don't rely on that. Rely on your true mind, your pure mind, your whole mind. Is that clear? And of course, he's going to talk about how to realize that. When you do that, then you will attain the awakening that will be the result of your deep practice. Now, the next chapter is interesting. It's called Choosing One Faculty in Order to Liberate All Six. And now, so the first fundamental is to understand, the turbidity of our conceptual mind, and to really understand we cannot rely on this mind with all its confusions, et cetera, to take us to freedom. Right? It doesn't know the way out. And it relies either on its own experience or on words. And our true nature is beyond words. It's our original nature. I was talking to somebody today, a member, and they were mentioning that a relative of theirs, a niece or something, had just had a baby. And they were saying, just being in the presence of this baby, that it's not too old. It just looks around. If you've ever been around a young child, a baby, they're just aware. They look. They see. They're aware. But they have no language, they have no thought, they have no concepts. They have no reference to anything. They're pure. That's the way we are. So, the second principle the Buddha says is if you have resolved to become fully awakened, so he's already saying this is a teaching for those who want to be fully awake, who are done with sleeping, who are done with living in a dream, who are done with daydreaming, who want to be awake. So this is not everyone who really has that desire to be an awakened being. So he said, you must courageously dedicate yourself to practice in accord with the Bodhisattva vehicle. This vehicle the Buddha is teaching is called the Bodhisattva vehicle. The Bodhisattva is an enlightened being who has dedicated their life to their own liberation and to liberating others, freeing all beings from their suffering. So the Buddha is now giving instruction. He's saying, you must decisively let go of everything that has conditioned attributes. Now, we are lay people. We have jobs, we have family, we have relations, right? So you might go, what? Right, Nicholas, what? Let go of everything? How can I, how am I going to drive to work, right? Yeah. So let me understand, he's giving meditation instructions for now. We'll understand it can be integrated. So what he's saying is when we are really doing the meditation that he'll be setting forth, he said, let go of everything that has conditioned attributes. Which is what? Which is what we said earlier. Let things just come and go. Don't grasp at them. Don't follow them. Don't embroider them. Don't be disturbed by them. Don't push them away. Don't invite them in. Just learn to rest in awareness. Right? The host. Welcome. Goodbye. Welcome. Goodbye. Right? That's all. Right? The host just stays. Right? Make sure everything is clean, taken care of, tidies up. Lets the guests come and go. That's the mind state of the practitioner. And then the Buddha said, carefully examine the source of your afflictions, which since time without beginning have created your karma and nurtured its growth. So, each one of us has karma of body, speech, and mind, the result of all our actions of body, speech, and mind. This karma, this repository of action, is what propels us in this life, moves us ever onward, right? Endlessly having different experiences, going different places, doing different things. This is our karma propelling it. And then the Buddha says, who is it that creates this karma and undergoes the results of the karma? If during your quest for full awakening, Ananda, you do not examine and contemplate the sources of affliction, you will not be able to understand the illusory and distorted nature of the perceiving faculties and their objects. So the Buddha is saying that for those of us who do want to awaken, well, we have to kind of also go in the other direction, which is to look into what is the source of my suffering? What are the source of my afflictions? What is it that moves my life in all these directions, which when I look at them objectively, I say, this is not what I want to do. This is not where I want to end up. This is not how I want to be. But it's like if we never stop, as the Buddha says, and look deeply into what is the cause of all this? You know, where is this all arising from? What is it that propels me forward? You know, what is it that's conditioning the way I live my life and the way I think and the way I feel and the choices I make and the feelings I have? I mean, you know, they're arising in my mind. And what is their source? Right? What's driving this whole show? So this type of reflection, this type of introspection, we can all do. You don't have to have a PhD in Buddhist studies. You don't have to be a monk or a nun. But you do have to be willing to stop and to take a very profound inventory of your mind. And if there are these things that are constantly propelling you, making it difficult for you to concentrate your mind, making it difficult for you to settle down, making it difficult for you to make wise decisions, that makes it difficult for you to have a peaceful mind, a wholesome mind, a mind at ease. You know, just to go on, just being driven by these inner forces, without ever stopping and looking and going, you know, what's going on here? I mean, that's really what he's saying. We need to stop and look what's going on there. And we can find it. Everybody can find it. But they have to be introspective. They have to be willing to look into their own mind. You've heard me say many times, we're all excellent at looking into other people's minds. Right? We are really excellent at figuring everybody else out, finding out what's wrong with them, telling them what's wrong with them. You know, we are incredibly wise and intelligent that way. But when it comes to our own stuff, it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's just, it's interesting, right? That we've developed this capacity to figure out everybody else and what their problems are and what they should be doing, and you know what I mean? But when it comes to ourselves, we go, I don't know. I mean, this is just the way I am, isn't it? I mean, I'm just born this way. We laugh. There are people in the room who are laughing. There are people out there on the screen who are laughing. But that's the way we are. Right? So the Buddha, this is a reverse kind of thing. It's like, let's use our introspective abilities. Let's use our intelligence, our ability to find causation to figure ourselves out first. Why? Because we want to be free of suffering. Because we want to realize our original mind. And again, for those who are near, I'm skipping around. I invite everybody to get themselves a copy of the Surangama Sutra. It's 465 pages, but you can also get their free PDFs online, various translations and commentaries that you can access. Ananda, you now wish to go upstream against the current of the river of desire which leads to death and rebirth. This is very important. Okay? Whether we call it the river of birth and death, whether we call it the river of our karma, whether the river of our causes and conditions, whether we call it the river of our habit energies, we are all of us being driven in a certain direction, right? By our habituations. If we are not conscious, the easiest thing is to just go with the river. Right? Has anybody ever, gotten in a kayak or a canoe or a raft or a tube and floated down the river with the current? Nothing easier, is it? You don't have to do anything. Kind of lay there on a tube and just kind of. But if you want to go against the current, if you want to go upriver, if you want to say, I want to get to the source of where this river comes from. Has anybody ever, canoed or kayaked against the current? That takes effort. Okay? And that's what the Buddha is saying to Ananda. He's saying, Ananda, if you really want to go against the current of your life energy, right, your diluted life energy, wanting to reach the source, the very source of your mind, if you want to reach that source where there is neither coming nor being nor ceasing, you should investigate how the six faculties function. The six faculties are again, so the Buddha is beginning with saying that which is most obvious to us. Every human being has these six faculties. We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, we sense, we feel with our body, and we think, we cognate with our six consciousness, right? Those are the six faculties through which we are human beings, through which we navigate life. All the information that comes into us, all your thoughts, what are you thinking about? Anything you think about has to be about something you've seen, you've heard, you smell, you've tasted, you've touched or felt, right? And then we make up, we give everything words, we give everything labels, we perceive. And so it's these six faculties are another way, these are the windows through which our consciousness looks out onto the world, right? These six faculties. So he says the practice is to investigate these six faculties and how they function. Which ones function upon contact with their objects, and which ones function while apart from their objects, which are more easily employed in the practice of reversing your attention, and which ones are less easily employed. Which ones are best suited for the breakthrough to enlightenment, and which ones are not efficacious. If you can discern which of your faculties can lead you to breakthrough to enlightenment, you will be able to go upstream against the current that carries the karma in which, due to your delusion, you have been immersed since the very beginning. And then he makes this very bold statement. One day of practice that relies on a fully effective faculty is equivalent to an eon of practice that relies on a faculty that is not effective. So again, there'll be more explanation of this. But basically, what's being posited here is, and there'll be, probably be next week, but there's a section called the 25 great bodhisattvas talk about their own enlightenment and which faculty they use. So basically, the Buddha is saying that each of us have to decide, if we can do this practice, which faculty do I want to investigate? Traditionally, I'll give you a little hint, for most human beings, seeing and hearing are the easiest because they are the ones that are most obvious and the ones we really are most aware of. So what he's positing is the seeing and hearing faculty usually flow out. It flows out, engages with sounds. It flows out, engages with sights. What the Buddha is positing is we go upstream. The source of seeing, the source of hearing, the source of smelling, source of tasting, the source of sensing, and the source of consciousness. This is the path, the direct path to enlightenment. This is I just always like this little one. I think it's very interesting. It says, he gives an analogy. This is really something else. This again is, we seem to think that like our mind and our awareness is like something, or like, anyhow, he gives an analogy. Okay, so he says you have a bunch of containers, right? They're all different shapes, right? And so therefore we could say the spaces within them are also different shapes. Now he says, if you take away so you got all these containers, right? And they're all just filled with space. And you probably think, oh, the round container has round space, and the square container has a square space inside it, and the rectangle space has a rectangle, the triangle one has a triangle space, right? But he said, if you take away the containers and look at the space that was in each of the containers, what would you say? Is the space all different? No. Space is just space. It doesn't matter what the container is. Seeing is just seeing. Hearing is just hearing. Being is just being. Mind is just mind. It's not about the container. See, we see each other. If you look at bodies are containers, right? They have their own shape, they have their own size, they have their own, all the characteristics of a body. Big, small, man, woman, But intrinsically, they're all the same. Intrinsically, we're all the same. Right? But, if all you see are externals, you go, well, that's a triangle, and that's a square, and that's a rectangle, and that's a circle, but in essence, they're all the same. They're all just space. So we're always distinguishing based on superficiality. And so if you have these 6 containers out, all of different shape, right? And when you see the containers, you go, all right, 6 different spaces. But he says, when you remove the containers, what happens with the space? Does it maintain the same shape? Maria Trace is laughing. You think that's ridiculous, eh? Right? The space all just what? But does it really merge, or was it always merged? You see? We think it merges, but it really merges? Or was it always there? It was always interpenetrating. Right? This is very important because this matrix of being in which everything, no matter what, is part of, it always just is. Right? There's no separation in it at all. All that you need to, this is the Buddha continuing, again, a lot more instructions. All that you need to do is not allow your attention to be diverted by the 12 conditioned attributes of, so this is now he's giving more instruction. This is deep construction, right? So, if you just kind of, I mean, if you read the whole sutra, like he gives examples. He'll talk about, so most people would think, oh, when I hear a sound, then I'm hearing, right? And when there's no sound, then there's this thing called silence. But the Buddha says, when you're not hearing anything, you're still hearing. Not hearing anything, you call silence, right? In the same way, when you are seeing something, when you're looking out and you're seeing things, you say, oh, I'm seeing this, seeing this. And then when you close your eyes, you would say what? So Nicholas, close your eyes. Look, poor Nicholas, he's new. So Nicholas, when you close your eyes, are you still seeing? What? Yes. How do you know the right answer? What are you still seeing? You're seeing, right, but most people would say, oh, that's blindness, you see? Like blindness is the absence of seeing. The Buddha's saying, no, seeing always is, right? Hearing always is, right? When we're not hearing sounds and we're hearing silence, we're hearing. Hearing always is. We don't get up in the morning and turn on the switches. Okay, let me turn on my visual switch, and let me turn on my hearing switch, and let me turn on my smelling switch. Is that the way it is? Does anybody have to do that kind of work in the morning? No, it's right there. Somebody wakes you in the night. Immediately you're aware. But it's not like you're immediately aware. You always were aware. Awareness never went away. Awareness is not dependent on anything. So all you need to do is not allow your attention to be diverted by the 12 conditioned attributes of sound and silence, contact, separation. So we touch, remove, silence, sound, flavor, absence of flavor, openness, blockage, coming into being, perishing, light and darkness. Right? So first we can't be diverted by just all the changes in the world. And next we extricate one faculty especially, and we detach it from its objects, and we redirect that faculty inward so that it can return to that which is original and true and pure. Then it will radiate the light of original understanding. This brilliant light will shine forth and extricate the other 5 faculties until they are completely free. So this is the practice that the Buddha teaches for awakening in the Surangama Sutra, right? That we pick a faculty, we extricate ourselves from endlessly following all the characteristics that our faculties, that we get lost in, and follow them back to the source. And then finally, because Ananda's a little slow, the Buddha wants to help him. And Ananda always says very beautiful things. But he just doesn't quite get it. He doesn't quite understand how to do it. And so after Ananda saying all this stuff, the Buddha says, Ananda, you are very learned, but you haven't put an end to your outflows. You know all the reasons for delusion, but when you encounter delusion, you fail to recognize it. Remember, Ananda? Up here, he knows everything. But yet in actuality and practice, he doesn't. it is to be feared that though you are sincere, you still do not quite trust the teachings. Right? Even though we are sincere, we hear the teachings, but we never 100% go with them. Right? The Buddha says, you're very sincere, you're very intelligent, but you don't trust the teachings enough to let go. Okay, the Buddha said, all right, he's going to, and then he says, so he asked Rahula. Rahula actually was his son, who, when the Buddha returned to Kapilavastu, after his great enlightenment and teaching, Rahula became a monk under him. So the Buddha said to Rahula, Rahula, can you please invite the bell, strike the bell? So I'll just play Rahula. And the Buddha said to Ananda, do you hear? And Ananda and all the assembled monks said, we hear. And then the Buddha waited till the bell had ceased ringing. And the Buddha said, now, do you hear? And the assembly, Ananda said, no, we do not hear. Because there was no sound to hear. So we said we don't hear. Once a month, again, the Buddha invited Rahula. And now the Buddha said, now, do you hear? And they said, yes, we hear. And then the Buddha, waited till the bell stopped ringing, and they said, and now do you hear? And they said, no, we do not. And he did this a couple of times, and then the Buddha said, how is it that you heard and then you did not hear? How is that? How'd that happen? And Ananda and the others said to the Buddha, we heard the bell when it was struck, and when at length the sounding of the bell had died away and the reverberations had faded, we no longer were hearing. Isn't that the common way we are? Yeah. I hear and then we don't hear. And the Buddha said, so again, we heard when the bell was invited, the bell was struck, and when the sound died away, we were no longer hearing. And again, the Buddha said to Rahula, please invite the bell. And again, the Buddha asked Ananda, is there a sound now? And Ananda said, yes, there is a sound. And when the sound is faded, the Buddha asked Ananda, is there a sound now? And Ananda said, no, there is no sound. And they, so the Buddha did this again. So you can see his teaching style, very direct. And the Buddha says to Ananda, how is it that there was a sound and then there was no sound? So everybody, is kind of like, come on, Buddha. They probably think the Buddha's a little slow or something, but it was so obvious, right? And they say, well, when the bell was struck, there was a sound. But when at length the sounding of the bell died away and the reverberations had faded, there was no longer any sound. You get it, Buddha? And then the Buddha looks at Ananda and the monks and he goes, why do you give such muddled answers? Buddha was very direct. And the Ananda and the others said to the Buddha, why do you say our answers were muddled? And the Buddha said, when I asked you whether you heard, you said you had heard. When I asked if there was a sound, you said there was a sound. Since you did not clearly distinguish between hearing and sound in your answer, how could I not say that your answer was muddled? So this is very important. This is something we do. There's awareness, and then that which we are aware. And we think they're the same, because they do get mixed. They do arise together. And the Buddha is showing it very directly. They are not the same. So the Buddha says, Ananda, once the sounding of the bell and its reverberations had faded, You said it can no longer be heard. If that were true, that you had stopped hearing, your essential capacity for hearing would have ceased to exist. Is that true? I mean, if you think about how we live our life, we're always moving around our six senses. Sometimes we're looking at things, sometimes we're listening to things, sometimes we're doing both, we're tasting. But you notice how effortlessly we can move around, right? Right? So if I said to everybody right now, feel what's going on in your knees. Feel what's going on in your neck. Right? Be aware of what you're seeing. Be aware of the sound of my voice. Was there any effort in any of that? Why was there no effort? Because all of them were alive already. Just because they had no object, it doesn't mean that your hearing, your seeing, your smelling, your tasting was not alive. If it were true that you had stopped hearing, your essential capacity for hearing would have ceased to exist. It would be like a dead tree that is unable to grow again, and that you would be unable to hear the bell if it were struck again. So he's saying, just because we don't hear a sound, it doesn't mean our hearing capacity, our hearing awareness is no longer present. So you knew when the bell sound, which was the object of your hearing, was present and when it wasn't, but do you know when your essential capacity for hearing was present and absent? It's never hearing, it's never absent. So therefore, Ananda, although sounds you hear come into being and cease to be, neither the presence nor the subsequent absence can cause your essential capacity for hearing to come into being and then cease to be. So we're talking about the same exact thing, host and guest. Right? What are we focused on? Are we focused on our intrinsic awareness, our intrinsic capacity for hearing, for smelling, for tasting, for being, what are we, or are we focused on all the objects? We get lost in the objects. Remember turbidity. We're just endlessly filled, our minds more and more filled with stuff and ideas and thoughts and feelings and stimulations. It's clogged. Right? And that's what we think is us. So we get stressed, we get anxious, we get this, we get that. And yet, our mind's essential capacity for awareness, we do not see. We are not aware of. We think it's not there. Right? This is very important. And because it's telling us it's always here. We don't have to make it happen. We don't have to do anything. We just have to learn to what? To find, to pay attention to it, to find it. Learn our way back home to the source. Okay? This is really simple, right? So, Surangama Sutra, we will continue next Thursday because I'm doing a workshop class on anxiety and stress. We'll continue. Thank you. It's the days of the week that I get confused about. Exactly right. So the class will be this Saturday and the following 3 Thursdays. So the Surangama Sutra will be the next 3 Tuesdays. Okay? And again, so we're getting practical. We'll get into the 25 sages, speak of their enlightenment experience, and then we'll hear about, actually in the back, the great Bodhisattva, Kuan Yin, Kanon, Avalokiteshvara, who hears the cries of the world, who will talk about her enlightenment experience through listening, really a beautiful story. So on that basis, we will end tonight. Let me turn over the merit. Whatever benefit has come to us this evening from listening to, learning, reflecting on the Surangama Sutra, great teachings of the Buddha, may the benefits be shared equally with all whom we encounter, whether near or far away, and may its effects ripple continuously to aid in the healing and transformation of the world. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Those at home, online, those in the hall, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.